everybody, and welcome back to the Vintage Sewing Machine Garage. I am working on this Singer 201 that you see in front of you. This is the machine that you will see in other videos if you haven't already. This is the machine that I mentioned that came from Scotland. Yes, it's a 201K, but it was actually manufactured and sold to a customer in the United Kingdom, in Scotland to be specific. And then that person immigrated to North America and they brought it with them. And of course they would have had a surprise when they got here because the North American electrical system is a 110, 120 voltage system. And of course the one in the United Kingdom is more commonly found in Europe. It goes up to 220, I believe even up to 250. Anyway, those two systems are not compatible. And I have a video, you can see the two motors here. I've got the motor that originally came with the machine. It's rated at the higher voltage, and I will not be using that. And I made a video on, you really do want to read anytime you have a machine. Look at the specifications that should be on the motor. It's either a sticker or back in the days they use a riveted plate, and that's going to tell you what the rating is. And the only time you would see a rating in that range that you're seeing on the original Scottish motor, it would be if you were looking at an industrial machine, because in North America they do use the higher voltage in some factories. But for North American residential power, which is what all of us are using, you are going to want the 110, 120 voltage motor. And of course this is the North American motor I bought. This one was made in Canada, but you can't always tell by where it was made because Singer had factories all over the world making things. But the key here is to look at the voltage. What's fascinating, I forgot to mention this, is that if you look, this motor is only rated at 0.53 amps, and yet these machines have a lot of power. I've talked before about how Singers were such powerful machines, but they didn't require the same amperage that later machines built in the 50s and 60s would. So why am I making the video today though? I wanted to show you, I've mentioned to you that underneath all of the dust and grime is a gorgeous, beautiful, shiny finish. And sometimes you will see what I call ghost marks on a machine. You can sometimes tell if something was there and is missing, right? Let's take a look and I'll show you something specific. It's easy to see when a machine has not had its motor taken off its mount. You'll notice that even with all the dust that I showed in another video where I have dust covering that beautiful glossy black lacquer, back here, which is the back side of the pillar of the machine, you'll notice it's really dusty and sort of an old, sort of an oily, dusty film, and that tells you that it's probably, I may be the first person to ever take the motor off since it was built, believe it or not. But again, the decals are in great shape here. I think this machine is going to clean up really beautifully. But talking about ghost marks, I wanted to show you an example of one. If you look at this piece here, this is the back plate that gives you access to the mechanicals on the back side of the machine. This plate I have polished. You guys have seen me do videos on polishing before. Originally, that plate was really dirty, and when I say dirty, unusually so. It was about the color of this little cord holder here, sort of a dark brownish color, and I believe it was a combination of just old dirt film, and it could even be old oil mixed in. Sometimes you will see something on a machine and you won't even know if that dark color is rust or if it's old oil, but I'll explain how to tell the difference and why it can it's not always a bad thing to have old oil in a machine. But let's talk about the ghost mark here. I'm going to move the camera a little bit closer. I'm also going to see if I can raise the height of it a bit. Now, I'm going to tilt in. You guys will recognize, particularly those of you who know the 201, this is a chrome or nickel-plated metal plate that runs across the top. And in the center of it is the original spool pin. But look at this, guys. Look here. You'll see I had taken off a felt washer. This is the original felt washer. I'll probably replace it with a new one. This one's not torn, but it's kind of flat and it's probably got old grease and oil in it. We'll see. I saved them in case I run out because I always want to have some kind of felt washer. The washers look nice, but the reason they're there is for the practical purpose of having something to put your thread spool on so it doesn't bounce as easily on the metal plate here. But this is basically what I got when I got the machine, and I went to take this off and I noticed, a ghost mark is really just another way of describing markings on a machine where you can tell that something was different in the past, and clearly the color of this plate was different. In fact, that felt really protected the metal finish. I don't even see any dirt or tarnish on it at all. And of course you can see where in the areas on either side, I'm going to zoom in here for you guys, you will see, shift the angle just a bit, you will see or notice all of this. Now what is this? This is a combination of old oil and dirt and dust. When you first see this, a lot of people assume that it's rust, and it's often not. Usually when you're looking at old oil, between the oil oxidizing and it kind of yellows as it ages, plus mixed in with some dirt, that's a recipe for what this looks like, which is basically old oil varnish. So I'm going to take right now I'm not even taking polish at this point. I'm going to take a cotton swab and I'm dipping it in 91% isopropyl rubbing alcohol. You can get it at the drugstore. Now, I like using cotton swabs. You guys know this. You've seen me, I think I have them in almost every video. The reason I like it is you put this in the alcohol, but don't just leave it dripping wet. Just touch it. It will absorb alcohol, and it tends to hold it really well. And you want that because you don't want alcohol to drip off of it and damage. It will severely damage any kind of lacquer or shellacked paint or varnish. So I've got this tip soaked in alcohol. Now let's see what happens here when I just put it there, right? And I start rubbing. Look at that. It's coming right up. This is how you know the difference between old oil and rust, okay? Now sometimes you will have rust on a surface. See how easily that came off? That's old oil. If that were rust, it would have taken a lot more rubbing. Sometimes alcohol will remove rust if it's a very light coating of rust. So I'm going to go to the other end of my cotton swab here, and I'm going to, you'll notice some brown areas on the spool pin. Spool pin would have had friction on it, right? It would have had that thing spinning. It might have even worn away some of the nickel plating. So let's look at that. Now this is pulling up something that looks very similar in color to this, sort of. But in fact, what this is likely a combination of old oil and a little bit of oxidation or rust. Now, most of the time, unless a machine has been literally part of a flood, in which case it can often be a lost cause, very often any kind of oxidation or rust that forms on a machine is often just simply due to moisture in the air where it was stored. Okay? This particular machine was stored in a storage unit for it could have been, who knows, 10 years or more, and that's not climate controlled. So it didn't get wet, but it got damp. Now, look at this as I'm pulling this off. You can always try alcohol in a cotton swab, and you'll be surprised at how much rust or oxidation. This is very light, right? This doesn't mean we have pitting here. Now, I've gotten a lot of that surface rust off. It's still going to be sort of a brown color, and that next we'll go with polish to remove more of that. But I wanted to kind of show you the difference. Sometimes it's old oil, sometimes it's rust, sometimes it's a combination of the two. Now, old oil is problematic when it causes a machine to bind up, right? And sometimes machines stick and you don't get much movement from them because of the old oil, and we have to clean that out. We have to use penetrant sometimes. We have to sometimes flood it with new oil to get the old pieces working. What we're doing is washing off the old oxidized gummy sewing machine oil that's been sitting there. But sometimes that old oil can be a good thing. You know, yes, it creates a lot more time and effort on our part. I've spent hours cleaning it off to get a machine to run. But there's one good thing about that old oil. This film here that formed where the washer wasn't protecting the metal acts as a protectant, okay? It's almost like kind of a rust proofing, right, if you will. And so if it wasn't for that, you know, you might even have more rust or damage. I think a lot of our machines are savable because of that old oil. It protects the bare metal parts that are exposed to oxidation because they're not painted, obviously. So again, you can see how easily this is coming off. This tells me all of this on this chrome plate here is old oil and dirt. And you know, I probably put a little polish on it, but it's just got a beautiful shine. And apparently that little felt also protected it. But again, you still, even after after I wiped this down with alcohol, there's still some here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, got an old piece, I always downcycle these old fabrics that I use when I'm testing whether a machine will form a good stitch. And I've got my Wienel German metal polish here. Let's pull that out. Sorry, I just realized I got the camera focused in tight. So I'm going to take this and I'm just going to kind of wrap it around this and see what that will remove. Metal polish will also remove oxidation and rust up to a point, right? So you can see here it's pulling off more than the alcohol did, but it's not pulling it all off, and I'm not surprised. That's pretty normal. So if I go back to get one of the clean areas of this, let's get another cotton swab. I warned you folks, if you get into this hobby, cotton swabs will be something you definitely want to keep a lot of, because I go through them like all the time. I go through them quite a bit. Now, we've gotten yet more of the oxidation off. Okay, we haven't hurt anything. Now, what else can we do? We still have some oxidation left. Well, we're not done. Our little bag of tricks. I have here 600 grit wet dry sandpaper. Sometimes it's called emery cloth, or you may buy emery cloth. You want something very fine. Don't use anything coarser like what you would sand wood with, because that can scratch the metal here. And I don't need this giant piece. Let me zoom back out. You guys are getting too much of a microscope view at the moment. So, you know, I want to cut a piece. I've got a pair of scissors. It's not a good pair. It's my sacrifice pair. And I want to, you know, get something kind of like that. Just cut that out. You can get this at hardware stores. A lot of the old-fashioned hardware stores, if you have one near you, you don't have to buy massive packs of this stuff. You can buy it by the sheet. You can get a variety of grits. So I'm going to take the wet dry sandpaper, and you don't need to wet it. You can, but that's not really what we want to do. Now notice what I'm doing here. I'm just kind of rubbing that there. And look guys, now I'm getting more of that oxidation off. And let's see, you only want to sand as much as you need to get the rust off, okay, as much as you can. Because remember, there's still some of the old coating on this steel. And there's no need to sand all the chrome off. That would be counterproductive in some ways. And I'm also not taking, it's not like it's taking me forever, right? So we come around and just look around the whole piece, see if you've gotten all the oxidation off. You can even twist it like that. Wow, look at that. Now I'm going to go back. I just need another, I'll probably just take like a little piece of cloth. Let's see. I'll take a little piece of remnant here. I'm just going to dip it very, very lightly in alcohol. But if there's any excess, squeeze that out before you get near your machine. Remember what I've told you about lacquer finishes and alcohol, they do not mix. You will ruin your finish. Now, I take this. Now, look at that, guys. I've cleaned it, and I've gotten virtually all the oxidation off that needs to come off. And a good finishing touch will be go back with a little polish. Some of you might, I've heard some of you talking about waxes. Waxes and polishes can be, oh, they're cousins to each other. I don't really need to fully wax it. But notice, even when I use the polish, after that sandpaper, look what I'm getting, folks. Right? So then, of course, you can use the polish on this here too, but alcohol was cleaning that. Go back and there you go, right? So I think that's certainly an improvement, and that should really stabilize this piece of metal. I don't think we're going to have any issues as long as you polish it and don't expose your machine to moisture. I think that will keep that pin looking fine and preventing further oxidation. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. I just wanted to show you it's these little things that you start to notice over the years as you engage in this hobby. But a lot of times I love to try to preserve the original parts if I can. If your machine is missing a pin like this, you can get reproductions, right? You can get vintage ones salvaged online, but you can get reproductions. You get them fast. You tap them in with a little rubber mallet and you're done. But if you have the original and it just needs to be spruced up, try to keep it. Try to, this took very little long. Making this video took longer than bringing this little spool pin back. So it's those little details and little touches that tell you a little something about how the machine was stored. I know that this machine was put in a storage unit, and I can also tell. If you have a machine that has no oxidation whatsoever, there's a pretty good chance that it was stored inside a home, and climate control comfort is what machines love best, just like their owners. Thanks for watching, everyone. Stay tuned. We'll be bringing more videos soon.